Glasgow, Kentucky, you're on the air.
Hello.
Hi.
I have two questions. One question is, how is our Bill of Rights being protected? Another one is, are we not fighting hate? And isn't that an idea? And I'm just concerned about those two questions.
Thanks. One last one. We'll go back to Brett Stevens. Houston, Texas, you're on the air.
I sat in the living room of a neighbor who is an editor of our local paper, which, Brian, you know what that is because you have one of the columnists on frequently. He sat there. He told me that we live under tyranny. Now, this is a good guy. In neighborhood terms, this is a good guy. He's an editor of the editorial section of our international section of the newspaper. If this is he wasn't drinking. He is not a teenager. How can I in any way credit this point of view as something I should turn to? It influences what I read, most definitely at the local level, and why I go to national press.
Okay, I'll let it go at that. Thank you. Brett Stevens, again, number of items.
Well, let me first of all thank the lady from Houston for being a faithful reader of the Journal. Of course, we always appreciate that. Whether it's at someone else's expense or not is her call entirely. The comment she relays about a local editor saying that the United States lives under tyranny is, I think, becoming depressingly typical in some quarters, and it just sort of shows, to a certain extent, the debasement of language that has occurred in I guess, recent decades. You use a word like tyranny to describe the Bush administration. Well, what words do you have left to describe someone like Hosni Mubarak? I was just in Egypt for a couple weeks reporting on how he's treating his opposition there, the kind of torture, genuine torture, real torture that prisoners there have had to endure. The fact that liberal opposition leaders are put in jail on lengthy sentences after trials with kangaroo courts. And Mubarak is himself considered a relative moderate, at least in comparison to someone like Kim Jong-il of North Korea or Robert Mugabe. So people like that editor who say with a straight face and, as she says, in possession of their faculties, that we live under tyranny, I think express not only a kind of level of stupidity, but an amazing naivete about the world as it is outside of our borders. I've spent most of my life abroad, and anyone who does so quickly understands that even by European standards, we are a much, much more liberal, much freer, much more open society than, say, Great Britain is, which has an Official Secrets Act which sharply limits the rights of the press, or countries like Germany, which have much more restrictive laws about, say, abortion than the United States does. This editor, I think, probably hasn't traveled more than 20 miles outside of his hometown. I mean, that's the sort of level of parochialism that comment betrays. Now, this gets to the comment from the lady from Kentucky. Not quite sure what the sort of drift of her comments was, but what's happening to the Bill of Rights? Well, it's being, as always, vigorously protected by an independent judiciary with judges appointed to, for the most part, to lifetime positions, appointed by Democrats, appointed by Republicans, some liberal, some conservative, and the rights there seem to me to be generally fairly thoroughly enforced, and that's why I don't see how this country's press liberties have been curtailed or any other kinds of liberties in the past 6 years or at least during my relatively young lifetime. She said something about fighting a war against hate, and in some sense that's true, in the sense that we are dealing with enemies among jihadis whose purpose is fundamentally to destroy not just our way of life, but destroy us. And you can actually find fatwas, texts, which say that it would be legitimate in some Salafi textbooks to detonate a nuclear bomb in the United States to kill millions of Americans. So that is precisely the kind of hate that we're dealing with. And so, I think to pretend that somehow the Bush administration is so utterly ogreish that it gives the bin Ladens of the world a run for their money is just preposterous.